Andy, first off, thank you so much for making the time today. I really appreciate it. And you've had an incredible journey over the course of your career. You've gone from college to number one employee at Perceptix, building a sales and marketing team, to now being the CEO of Talewind. And I mean, it's those journeys have got to be, you've got to have some incredible stories coming out of that. I mean, just can you give us, a quick flyover real quick in terms of your career, a couple of, high spots that you like and where you're at, why Tailwind at the end?
Yeah, yeah, no, thanks, Mike. Well, I had the great fortune and privilege to be able to work for a portion of my career with my father. Perceptix was a HR software technology firm that he was one of the founders of in the 90s. And this is in the employee engagement space. And this was a space that was kind of created, I say created, but it was moved along a lot by the organization Gallup. And they coined this phrase, employee engagement. But companies had done employee morale or employee satisfaction surveys for decades. And this is different than what you think of as like a Survey Monkey survey or just these little polls that we do. But it really was a more in-depth study, psychological study, if you will, across the organization and the workforce to ascertain how an organization can make improvements in the work experience that people are having in their everyday jobs and how that connects to productivity and ultimately their engagement or passion in the work. And so at the time in the 90s, a lot of that was done manually, Scantron forms, and then consultants would come in afterwards and spend quite a lot of time analyzing these results. And they would provide binders worth of reports back to managers across these organizations. And it would take months to get those results back. And so this was a challenge because if you think about a survey, it's really like a conversation that leaders are having with other people. And they're asking questions like, hey, are you proud to work here? Would you recommend this as a great place to work? How's the experience like working with your boss? Or do you have the tools and resources that you need? And then after asking that question, they make them wait for 4 or 5 months before they actually do anything with that response or come back and respond back to them. And by that time, a lot of employees start to feel like, well, they didn't do anything about my feedback or they didn't care. And so Perceptix had a very unique opportunity. In 96, when Netscape Navigator was first coming on the scene, my father developed with a partner an online real-time version of a survey platform where all of these individuals working for an organization could come on and take that survey, and all of the results would be tabulated in real time in a web browser and then provided back to leadership across the organization while the survey was being taken. And so they could get those tabulated favorability reports or other things like that right away instead of waiting so long. And so they had developed something that really revolutionized the technology of how this industry worked. And because surveys were run by large consulting organizations like Aon and Towers and the Hay Group and Gallup, to mention a few, they really never implemented a technology over the next 15 years that really caught up. And so Perceptix kind of had this unique leapfrog technology event that really got us into the market, but nobody knew who Perceptix was. And so I was in high school, I think, at the time when they first built this thing. And fast forward about 10 years, I was out of college. I'd had a couple sales jobs. And my father's partner, who was the CEO of Perceptix, invited me to join the team. And so I was one of the very first contributors that joined the team. In fact, I think there were 5 at the time that were all co-owners of the organization. And I was the first employee that wasn't an owner. But I came in to help with building sales and marketing. And we started, I think, that year, less than $1 million in revenue, annual revenue. By the time I left the organization in 2020, I think we were we were over 30 million annually in revenue. The organization had grown from the 6 of us to over 300 employees now that are at the organization. And so we saw a lot of success, and it was quite a ride. But yeah, during those early years when I joined, one of the challenges with Perceptics is that we had this amazing technology, but the market didn't know about us. And how do you get the word out? And really, how do you convince people to take you seriously? Because we're sort of these new kids on the block, and we were technologists. We weren't IO psychologists or consultants with pedigrees and names that were known in the industry, but we were competing with really data scientists, psychologists, consulting organizations that organizations trusted. And so we were sort of like the the nerdy science geek showing up to prom in a Ferrari. So and it kind of took a little while for us to really break through what the paradigm was in the industry. The paradigm was that, well, we're going to rely on research and the tried and true method. And we had to break through that and said, well, no, there's a better way with technology. And when we're making people wait to get feedback, then we're losing the opportunity to make real improvements in the organization. And so that was something we started doing. And we also focused on the why instead of the what. I think that made a huge impact in why we beat organizations like Gallup. So what I mean by that, there was a talk, I think it was even a book written by Simon Sinek, if you've heard of him, called Start With Why. And that was something that made an impact on me. But one of the things that we did at Perceptics was getting away from the data science and the what of the survey into really talking to organizations about why we do a survey to begin with. And a lot of times companies would get hung up on the results, the analysis, the data overall. So senior executives kind of see a picture of what's going on in the organization. It can help them make decisions. That's good. But really, at the end of the day, that's not the reason we should be doing a survey, which is communication with all our people. We should be doing it to really improve their work experience and make them feel valued and listened to in the organization. Because when we can achieve that, then they start to become more engaged and more productive. And that ultimately is going to increase our success more than anything else. And so that's the message that we really honed in on, and it excited companies. And we started to grow very quickly at that point. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the story of how I got involved in Perceptics and how we started to grow.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I think, when you talk about Start With Why, that's one of my favorite books and one of my favorite premises. So what happened at Perceptics that caused you to start Talewind?
Yeah, great question. So probably about 2010, I'd say 2011, each deal that we worked on at Perceptics was a little bespoke, I guess I would say, because in addition to the technology, we provided a number of services, and that had to happen with every project that we did. The reason for that is each time an organization ran a survey, we had a project team that would actually have to load a lot of their organizational data and build out a hierarchy of every single employee so that they would have accurate reporting of all the results throughout the organization. And that was a bit of a heavy lift. And we had to do that differently for every organization because every organization was different. So when I built out a proposal, it would take me hours to write a proposal. I mean, at minimum 4 hours, because I had to rewrite a number of bullet points around the deliverables that we'd be providing on the services. And then search and replace. You know how that goes. If you've written a lot of proposals, you're opening your Word template and you're searching and replacing and changing all that content for each deal. For us, at minimum, it took about 4 hours, and sometimes it could take a lot longer than that. And so what we did is we created a tool internally that we called our proposal generator. And in the beginning, it was Microsoft Word and Excel, and we had our proposal template in Word that was about 30 pages long. And then instead of going through that and editing it every time we were going to present for a new potential customer, we set up an Excel survey, if you will. We were in the survey business, and the Excel questionnaire would walk the sales rep through a number of questions about the deal. And once they finished filling that out, we would hit mail merge, and it would go over to that Word template, and it would automatically rewrite that whole document with all of the information that we filled out in the Excel. And some of it could be fairly complex. It could replace words or sentences or entire paragraphs, or one question could search and replace 50 different things in that document. And so then we could write that proposal in about 15 minutes instead of 4 hours. And so that was essentially one of the very early versions of I guess the concept for what would become Tailwind. What we do now is a lot more than that, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But that was sort of the foundation. Fast forward to 2017, and I was at that time leading marketing and also doing a lot of sales for the company. And I closed a deal with Apple at the time. Fortune won the biggest contract in the history of our organization. It was a big deal for us. And I like to do win-loss reviews. So whether I won a deal or I lost a deal, I'd always call and say, hey, let us know, what did we do right if we won? Or if we didn't win, what can we do better? So in this case, why did we win? And it was interesting because what they said to me was, we chose you because of your sales process. And that was such an interesting response for me, because I'm used to hearing, we love the product, or we loved your services, or we love your culture. But in this case, they said, you won because of your sales process. So that was a new kind of answer for me. And I asked, well, tell me about that. Why did that impress you so much? And what I was told is, well, okay, we've been working together for about 6 months, right? And over that time, you've submitted to us an RFI response. You sent over some brochures, a couple of videos, a proposal, a sales presentation. And across everything that you sent us, I could not find a single typo anywhere in that whole time. Everything that you sent was designed for us with our branding, even with down to our fonts. And you also turned it around same day. And so what I was told was that was night and day different from any of your competitors. I mean, they made us wait to turn things around to us. It didn't look good. It wasn't branded for us. So you were just head and shoulders, is the phrase they used, above all your competitors. And it was clear that you cared more about our business than they did. That was what they took away just from our process around content that we were providing during the sales process. But what she said at the end of it was what really blew me away. She said that experience told us everything we needed to know for what it was going to be like to work with the rest of your team and your organization. So that hit me like a ton of bricks, because Mike, we know as sellers, we're providing a first impression of our product or our service. We're the face, we're the first ones clients are talking to. But I think what we don't always realize is that they're not just getting an idea of our service and product by talking to us. They're forming an opinion about our culture and our work ethic, how hard we work, the quality of our work, how much integrity we have through the experience they're having with us as a salesperson. And that goes beyond just the face-to-face conversations, but how we actually show up in the digital space and with the content that we're providing to them. They're making those evaluations. And I don't think we think about that enough. And so when I had that experience, that's what really, I think, lit the fire for the idea for Tailwind. I mean, obviously, it's amazing to take a proposal process that used to take 20 hours and get it down to 30 minutes. That's huge. I mean, that provides a lot of value. And that's one of our clients right now. They used to spend over 20 hours on every single proposal that they wrote, a team of people on it, and now it takes them less than an hour. And so just the time savings on that is huge, but it also makes them more responsive, increases sales acceleration. That's all great. But I think what really got me excited is this idea that we can show up so different from competitors with a process like this, that it wows them to the point where that alone is going to be the reason they choose to work with us. And this is a company like Apple making that decision for that reason, right? And so that was kind of the instigation, if you will, for why we decided to start Tailwind. So myself and a few others from Perceptics moved on at different periods in the course of that employment, and kind of got together again and started up Tailwind. And that we started this in 2021. We just launched the application last year in 2023, and are now bringing our first clients on. So it's pretty exciting.
That's huge. I mean, when you think about that, to your point, it's it's a double-edged sword in a very positive way in what you're doing, right? You're providing back office productivity, which is easily measurable, but then you're also providing customer satisfaction and actually customer delight on the other side, which is not always easy to measure unless you do the win-loss analysis and that comes out, right? There's a lot of times that because it because you're so maniacal about win-loss analysis, how often do you actually hear somebody say you won because of your responsiveness and your error free? And how often have you heard that story similar to what you heard from Apple now that you know what you're looking for?
Yeah, more and more. So I think what you hear is, there's an attention to detail, there's a care and concern. A lot of ways it'll be softer in the way they put it. They might just talk about the team overall. They'll say, "Well, we really trust that you have our best interest in mind," is something that you hear you say. I hear said a lot. But you unpack that and you want to understand, well, how is it that through just the sales experience, they trust all of us, that they think that we have their best interest in mind more than our competitors do? Well, the only conclusion is that it has to be through the experience that we're providing during the sales process. And I heard it articulated exactly that way um, from Apple when we closed that deal. And so now it makes so much sense to me when we win for some of those reasons.
Okay, so quick question for you, and a curveball, so to speak. When you've gone through a career like you have, and then also when you made the pivot from sales and marketing to CEO, it's not all sunshine and roses, right? Sometimes that there's gut check moments, and there's, oh, what just happened? What as you think back on your career, what's one or two of those moments where you went, oh no, and they became learning moments and catapulted you forward?
Well, I would say one of the big things that I would tell myself if I was younger, kind of going back and a lot of experiences I've had, is that good is better than perfect. Uh, so this is something that's been hard for me because I am someone that some people will call me a perfectionist, but I will tinker with things until I think that they're just exactly right and delay getting a product out or getting a marketing piece out, or even getting something responsive back to a potential customer because I really want to just shape it into the perfect response. And I think over time, what I've learned is that responsiveness is so important, and also being able to get things done is more important. And you're going to win more, you're going to be faster with your development, more agile, more flexible, more nimble, ultimately just more successful when you focus on being good rather than being perfect. So that's something that I would say that I've learned, and I learned through making mistakes. And so with Tailwind in particular, last year in, well, I would say 2022, the end of 2022, we were getting close to launching the app. And at that time, our architecture had a front end app and a back end app that talked to each other. And we just started to realize that it wasn't going well. It wasn't working quite well. And so there was sort of a decision we made. And one of the things that we could have done is just try to perfect a few things and keep going. But we ended up completely changing course, rebuilding the entire app and doing it differently. And instead of focusing on all these perfect little pieces that we're trying to come together, we focused on getting something that worked really solidly and was good. But we rebuilt the whole thing in 3 months and then launched the app in April of 23. And then it ended up being, I think, better from an overall user experience than what we were going for when sometimes we got too wrapped up in the weeds. And that leads me to something else. I would say that I think it's important to realize that we're going to learn along the way, and failing and learning along the way is an incredibly valuable part of building a business or building a product or whatever you might want to call it. I think when you have the arrogance or the naivety that you have everything figured out and you just blindly march forward, you're not going to succeed. I think you have to pause and you have to listen to what the market is saying, listen to what your customers are saying, listen to what your own people are saying, and be able to be nimble and pivot quickly. That's really, really pretty important. So one of the things for me is that going from HR technology into the sales technology space, I was pretty naive because I thought, well, I've been in sales for 15 years. This is going to be no problem to sell sales technology, and I've been in technology. So, I get into this thing and I realize how much I don't know about sales tools and technology stacks and even sales process. I mean, I knew what we did at my company, but there's so much out there that I didn't know. And so it took, a good portion of time as I was starting Tailwind to really just learn this space and learn about sales teams and their process and what the challenges are and what tools are out there that are trying to solve these problems. So I think having the humility to realize there's a lot we don't know, be willing to learn and be willing to pivot quickly when you do learn. I think that's incredibly important. It's really helped us for building our app and getting into what we're doing in Tailwind.
I love that. I'm just taking some notes too while you're going. This is fantastic. So it's interesting because one of the things that you were talking about along those lines made me also think back to I'm a big fan of faith and sports, and two different things, but one of the areas and innovation actually, and I see those three things kind of come together in different ways, but one that consistently comes up in sports is you learn more from a loss than you do from a win, right? Almost any team you talk to, it's just because it just hits harder. And um, and I think the other thing that you touched on, right, was the ability to be nimble and pivot. So apply those lessons, and it's having the humility to be flexible with the business to meet the customers where they are and recognize when your assumption was your leap of faith assumption was just wrong, right? And that's one of those things that I see a lot of times entrepreneurs, visionary entrepreneurs struggle with, because what makes them so successful is a dogged relentlessness to the pursuit of the vision, right? And being able to push through. But you also have to recognize when you're just wrong, right? It doesn't matter how stubborn you are, right? And how persistent you are. If you're wrong, you're wrong. And so have you figured out how to modulate that throttle between those two competing edges?
Yeah, I think that what you just hit on is probably what is a marker for success for a lot of startups, whether or not they succeed. But yeah, I would say that for myself, I am one of those stubborn, obstinate kind of assertive personalities that let's just charge up the hill. But one of the things that I've really done is spent a lot of time talking with the market and customers. And so as we demo our tool at Tailwind, I'm really listening to what the feedback is, what's resonating with them. And then for those that are using the platform, what are they using the most? What are they asking for? And so it's listening to that feedback and having the humility to say, maybe I don't know everything, and maybe I should start to listen to what it is people are telling me that is most valuable to them. So the way that has been working out recently at Tailwind is, our core product is really focused around proposals and contracts and documents that we automate and generate for our clients. But what we're learning is a lot of individuals that are interested in Tailwind also want some other products that are in support of that, like some content management, the digital sales room piece for how we deliver content. And we have those products as part of our suite, thinking ahead with some of that, but they're not as strong. And so now we're starting to ask questions like, well, maybe those products need to be a little stronger because it seems to be what a lot of people are interested in. So I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a challenge because it's this delicate balance of staying focused on kind of a narrow vision. Because that's the other thing, is if we get too all over the place and distracted, that can be a problem too. So I'd say you kind of have to hold both in tension. You need to stay true to your vision and what kind of compels you forward, but also be willing to have the humility that you might be wrong. And it's okay to be wrong. I think it's right to continuing making assumptions, knowing that you could be wrong in that assumption, and just be willing to pivot and make a new assumption. That's all. Just know that the first assumption you make, or even the 10th one you make, may not be right, probably won't be right. uh, but you got to go for it with energy.
Yeah, I love that. I was talking to a friend and colleague of mine recently who's in the military and in special forces, and he was, saying that essentially, when you're in a bad situation, the best decision is the right decision. The next best decision is the wrong decision, and the decision that will kill you is no decision, right? And I think that whenever you're in startup mode and in business, period, right? You see a lot of folks that aspire to leadership roles that don't truly aren't comfortable making decisions, and so they will try and make decisions through committees and through consensus and things like that, and that's what leads to analysis paralysis and all the other wonderful sayings, right? So, question for you though, because one of the things you're trying to do is you're trying to sell into those organizations where sometimes decisions are hard to make, right? How do you help them make decisions regarding Tailwind?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we focus on is their sales process. So when we start a conversation with a prospect, we don't start with just demoing our product. We first ask them about their current sales process. We want to understand it, but we also want to help them identify where there are gaps and where there are things that are maybe getting in the way of their sales effectiveness. And I would go beyond that and say their sales acceleration and close rates. And that gets into, what are some administrative burdens that are bogging down the sales team that's getting in the way of their effectiveness, or frustrating them, or causing delays in responsiveness to clients. And so we sort of do an evaluation of the whole tech stack and process, and then start to talk about where we can fit in that. So I think that that's how we approach it. And I think that the response to that has been positive, because we come across more as partners or consultants than we just do trying to sell a software technology to them.
Do you have an ICP or an ideal customer profile for Tailwind?
We do. Yeah. So right now, I would say that the ideal customer is an organization that has a more complex service that they sell, which means that the sales documentation, whether it's a proposal or a statement of work or any content that they're using to close a deal, tends to be pretty bespoke from deal to deal. And so it takes them quite a lot of time and effort to put together a proposal response when they're selling. In cases like that, we can take those documents, and even if there's 100 pages and thousands of permutations of content, we can automate all of it. And so that's one of the things that's different about Tailwind, because there's some SaaS proposal tools out there. I think there's PandaDoc and Proposify and Quiller. They all kind of work the same way. They give you a template on a palette, and you can drag and drop content and kind of rewrite stuff and then send it off. We're different in that we're more of a services organization. And so we have the technology piece that they're going to use, but for every client that we have, we want to onboard their content, rebuild in the Tailwind platform, and build automation around every piece of content. And so in our environment, once we're done, they have a form that every rep that has access can fill out, and that form is unique for just their organization and just their document that they're generating. And so by the time, yeah.
because one of the biggest issues that I've always had with in the SaaS world, and it goes back to like ERPs and whatnot, is that they really create their software structure, and then that defines how the business is going to operate, the client's going to operate. And what I'm hearing from you is Tailwind actually adapts and adopts and fits the existing sales process for your client versus so like even Salesforce forces people, even though they've got it's highly customizable, it still forces you into their core backbone and core structure.
Right, right. You got to follow kind of the software and the way that it's laid out and the rules that it has in place. And then it's a self-service component. So then you have to have full-time staff that actually become experts on that tool and manage and maintain it. And so what we're saying is, no, you don't need to use a piece of software that you're stuck in, and you don't even need to have support staff that become experts in that software. We're going to partner with you and be part of your team. And we're going to essentially build out our platform around your process and around your documents. And then we maintain it. And so at the end of the day, we just want your team simply be able to log in and say, hey, I need to get a master services agreement or an NDA or a contract or a proposal or you name it, a pitch deck over to such and such client. We want them to go in and just push a button in Tailwind and it brands it, fills in all the content specific to that customer, specific to that deal, and they're able to be responsive and make it look beautiful for that specific client and be on their way. And so it removes the administrative burden, it removes all the time they're doing data entry and writing content, and they're relying on us as a team and a technology to do it for them based on their process.
That's powerful. Okay, so as we wrap up here real quick, first off, thank you. I really appreciate this. The other thing is, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Somebody was interested in Tailwind, or if they just wanted to talk to you about whatever they need to talk to you about,
Yeah, of course. I think the best way would be our website. So tailwind.com. That's spelled Tale, like a tale or a story, tailwind.com. And our email's on there. You can reach me at amorehouse@tailwind.com. You can find us on LinkedIn as well. So there's a few different channels you can get in touch with us.
we'll put all of that in the bio and the write up on this as well. And again, I just want to say thank you, Andy. This has been fantastic. I love what you've done with Tailwind, and I'm excited to see where it goes because you're really transforming the sales process. And just want to say thanks.
So, well, thank you very much. And I would close with kind of just talking about why we think this is so important. So we had COVID happen, now post-COVID. There's just a different expectation that buyers have today. And I think a lot of times as sellers, we're getting less and less face time with our potential buyers. We also know that the buying committee or the number of people involved in making buying decisions is growing. And so how we show up when we're sending content is becoming critically important, or the experience that we're creating when our buyers are interacting with our content is becoming critically important. And so how are we showing up? Are we being responsive? Are we being consistent? Are we accurate? Are we creating appeal? Are we showing up so good that people are wowed and we're setting ourselves apart from competition? And I think that's one of the whys behind what we're doing with Tailwind, outside of just increasing sales acceleration and reducing the admin burden of all the tools that we're using.
I love that. The other thing that we were talking about just before it started, and I realized we haven't touched on, is you said there was a ton of data that's been out there right now in terms of the complexity of the sale, and just the research that you guys had done, as well as working with McKinsey and pulling information from McKinsey and corporate executive board and things like that. What went on there?
Well, if you look at some research from Forrester and corporate executive board, they've shown that over time, the size of the buying team has been growing substantially. And now it's 7 or more people on average that are involved in making a decision about a B2B purchase. And that's tough as a seller because typically I have a relationship with 1 or 2. And so there's on average 5 people behind the scenes that I've never even spoken to. that are influential in the decision. And so what do we do about that? And so that's one of the things too that we're trying to solve with Tailwind. So with Tailwind, we use a digital sales room. We call it our showroom for delivering all content in a deal. And one of the things that we do is we register the buyers, and so we can see who's on the buying committee. So even if I haven't met everybody that's involved in looking at our offer, it's showing me their name and when and if they're looking at my content. So I can see, for example, one potential client that I had a couple months ago, they sent it internally to their senior VP to look at my proposal. And I didn't even know that person's name. I didn't know they existed. But then I see it pop up. Oh, so and so viewed your proposal. And so I think, oh, who's that? I go on LinkedIn and I search his name, and I find out that that's the executive sponsor. That's the senior VP that really is going to be signing off on whether or not they're moving forward. And so now I've got his email. I know what he looked at when he looked at it. Now I have an invitation as a seller to reach out and say, hey, I saw you took a look at the proposal. Let me introduce myself. Let me know if you have any questions, so I can start that relationship where otherwise I wouldn't even known they existed, let alone being involved in that purchase decision. So I think that that's one important thing we need to be looking at. Something else I talk about in some data I've been looking at is kind of getting back to that experience that we're creating and how important that is. So again, corporate executive board, McKinsey's done some research, but what we're seeing now is that the buying experience is more important to a B2B buying decision than even price or product. So I think it was 53% on a survey that was done by, it was either McKinsey or CEB. 53% said that their buyer experience was more important than price or product in making the decision. And then some other details that are important. So now over 70% of buyers are preferring remote digital environments or self-service environments when evaluating what they're going to buy over talking to a live salesperson. And in fact, this is a crazy stat that I think everyone will be wanting to hear. Nearly 1 in 4 buyers have said that they're going to choose their vendor or their product or their service without ever speaking to a salesperson, right? So that's an alarming stat. I mean, that means for us as B2B sellers that basically 25% of all of our potential customers are never even going to talk to us, and they're going to make a decision and buy. And so it starts to become critically important how we're showing up in the digital space and how we're engaging with buyers outside of the traditional face-to-face sales calls. And so that's where we get into content automation and the digital sales rooms, and making our content show up so good that we can't be ignored.
That is powerful. It's funny because I remember dating all the way back to 2010-ish, right? There were studies about, the great retirement that was coming, and the digital divide was changing, right? And essentially it was the way business was done, 80-90% was face to face, but that was going to transition, and that's happened, is what's happened, right? I mean, it has happened. It is here now, and all that stuff about it's coming is now it's here, and either you're ready and you're good, or you're not, and you better fix it fast. Yeah, and even if you're ready, right? It's the market is changing so fast and so dynamically that I don't know how people couldn't and wouldn't use, especially when you're talking about like a complex sell, or you're dealing with a buying committee of 5, 6, or 7 people. You've got to have a tool like what you got in order to make that happen. It's just critical.
Yeah. Well, that's our goal. We want to help organizations that up till now haven't had a good solution for something like this. As I mentioned, there's some SaaS tools that will automate proposals, but they only work if your proposal is kind of a cut form, very simple. And so there's a lot of organizations that have been feeling the pain of building a lot of content manually for all their deals. And so I think that we're filling a niche need there that's going to help a lot of organizations.
Well, and I would actually argue you're probably also creating a market in the sense that there's a lot of people that a lot of companies that have forced their proposals and their documents to fit into a consistent, canned approach that
Yeah.
given the freedom and flexibility, they would customize it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we have a client that once they started working with us to implement, they started to realize the freedom they had to update their proposal. A lot of the decisions that had been made in their proposal beforehand were based on limitations. And so now it's like the world opens up to you, and you can really even have marketing get involved in kind of upping the game of how you're presenting to clients. And so we had one client that actually completely redesigned their proposal document once they realized how much we could still even automate all of those new additions that they made to it to make it improved and look better.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, Andy, thank you again. I appreciate it. One quick circle back on this. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Talewind.com. You find our email there, and you can TALEWIND.com.
Okay, fantastic. Andy, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a great day, man.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.